When we had Jimmy Clues and he did the box with little silver things in the top
Yeah.
of it? It was a straight-sided box. Remember he had a special tool for that bottom? He had a special tool. It was a straight scraper that he ground off one side where he could use the side, smooth the sides going down.
It's called a box scraper.
But his was not like that.
But this is the Sorby version, okay? And I'll talk about doing this. This will give you for a straight box, it does really great. I use this a lot for some other things as well. But this edge, the nose is sharp, and this edge is sharp. And so when you go into a box, you can go in like this and just clean up that wall. Yeah, I will tell you that there's one thing you should kind of pay attention to. This should not be 90 degrees. It should be more like 88 or 87. Because if you want to get into that corner and get a nice square corner from the bottom over, if you have it square at a 90, when you come in and you hit that bottom, you're going to catch this part of that on the bottom. If you have it just a couple of degrees relieved, you can get right into that corner. All right. All right. Let's see what we can do here. Yeah, of course. Okay. So I'm just going to round this over. I need to put a tenon at both ends. Huh? So because of the shape of this blank, this is going to have to be an elongated ginger jar. All right. I might have to break my rule and make it a little smaller foot than I would normally like. Wait, let me do one more. Pardon me? Yeah. When we used to go to Safe Harbor, we ended up buying a pallet or half a pallet of wood from a guy in Stark. He had gone to an auction and put in a bid and won some wood. 5 semi-trailer vans full. And so we went and he sold it to us pretty cheap. That's all the wood we used to use up at Safe Harbor. I thought I want some for myself. That was 3.5 by 3.5 by 18 inches. They were furniture parts. And so I went up, got in contact with him and said, hey, I want to buy some of that on my own. And he said the people I had the 5 trailers on told me I had a leave, so I gave it all away as firewood. 5 trailers loaded. He had 1 skid left. So I bought this. There's like 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 by 3 foot long.
You also had some of the Raymond, and I still got some of it.
Yep, that was it.
Jay and I bought a whole pallet of it.
The only thing about the ramen is it had silicone. It was tough on tools. I didn't bring it. I forgot. I have it's like an old Craftsman, high carbon one, but it's called a beating tool, and all it is like it's like a Badan with an angle on it, and I've just ground it so it really does these. I can just push it in there, and it'll do the taper and everything on the tenons. A couple of things. One, the ginger jar lid isn't particularly big. I'm going to probably turn this off. Very often, if you need it, you can turn into the tenon. All right, if you're going to make it a small. If you're going to make it a square one, no. You're going to make there's going to be where the top of the lid is. I'm going to make the bottom of the lid here. Because this is going to be a cap fit, all right, the next thing I have to make is I'm going to have to part this off, right? So if this had a lot of grain in it that I wanted to match up, I'll use this parting tool, because this is as thin as I got, heavy enough to go in there and part something like this off, all right? If I don't care about if the grain is straight, and this one if you look at it here, this is pretty dang straight. All right, I'm not so worried about that. So I may use a regular parting tool to part that off. And that's about that thick. All right. And then I need to have the tenon. So the tenons, let me make the tenon about that thick, that high. All right. And again, I'm going to have a tough time. Now, see if I make the bottom of that here, and try and get some kind of shape like that on it. This is way too big. All right, so I'm eventually going to have to maybe even cut it down to about there. But that's all right, I can play with that. The reason I've left a lot of space here is because, well, one, I'm going to need to part that off as well. But to do the bottom of this, I have to jam chuck it. I have to reverse jam chuck it, all right? And so I'm going to use this bottom part as the thing that's going to hold the bottom in place while I turn the bottom smooth and do some decoration or something on it, okay? So that's, boxes are, if you don't learn anything else, you're going to learn jam chuck basics, all right? And it's the classic, the one truth with making the tenon fit, because you need to have a tenon fit for your lid, you need to have a tenon fit for your jam chuck, okay? The thing is, when you're in there with your skew or your parting tool, taking off a little wood off of one side, you're taking it off of both sides. All right? So if you think all I need to do is take a little bit and you hit it a little hard, it's going to be loose. That jam chuck will be loose. So you have to approach it very slowly to get it right. Okay. So what we've said in this case is I need to part it off here. Oh, I did put it there. And we'll work on that one. And since I have a little extra here, I'm going to do my offset parting tool cuts going up to the top. Is there any light in here? So normally you can saw that, or for a box, it doesn't bother me. What I'll do is I'll take it off and spin it. I don't know if it's convention. It's just that most of the folks that I've seen that turn a box tend to turn the lid first. And I could have, if you think about it, I could have, if I would have turned the tenons on both sides and then mounted it in the chuck and then cleaned it up before I parted it off, I could have left the lid here and parted it off here and just leave it in here. But typically I do it in this sequence. Okay. So the thing about this now is I'm just looking for this to be a cap. And if you look at, well, let's go with the really good example here. Well, you can see it's a little over half this is a little over half of the diameter of the base, all right? So if that base is 2.5 inches, I'm going to have to take a fair amount off. just switching from a standard to a detail gouge so I can get in there a little bit better. Now, I don't have to finish it now, all right, because I don't have enough place to work in here, right? But that's what I'll make when I put the bottom in. I'll turn the tenon on the bottom into a jam chuck so I can put this on, jam it in there, and then finish turning this. But the thing I need to do now is work on the interior. So if you go in with a spindle gouge, you can poke it in and it will drill. But when you're coming out, come out at between 9 and 10 o'clock, all right, and cut on the lower wing. I want to get the real estate out of here so I can get a wall thickness. Then I'm leaving enough room in here that I can put a straight wall on the inside. All right. If you come out and see it, it's probably 3/16, and I don't need a ton of wall thickness right here. The other thing is, because I'm kind of limited in a ginger jar style with the size of the blank I've got, the fatter this is, the more kind of clunky it's going to look. So if I can get this smaller by keeping the wall a little bit thinner, all right, then I'm probably in better shape. Now, the same thing happens. You can drill this out a ways. You can use a smaller drill to be a depth drill, or you can use a Forstner to do some level of removal of wood. But the thing is, if you're going to do it with a gouge, or if you're going to do it with a scraper, very often you'll end with a nipple in the bottom. All right. So you can do one of two things. You can make it so that inside that lid, that becomes the inside shape, okay, where you're coming up the wall, and then you come down to have a point in the center, or you can take that out. And do you know how to take out one of those from something like this? What's the best way to do that? If you're going to you use a scraper generally, you go below it, up to the left, up and to the left. And so let me work on that. Now, I do have two easy tools. This is one. I use it to do this stuff, and I have one that has the real bend in it to do under the collar in the holoforms. So I'm going to go underneath it and then come up and to the left. So if you see, Colleen, I'm being very careful when I'm messing around in here. I'm not coming out to this edge. I'm preserving that part so when I go to finish it, I can just make a clean cut and that's that. Yeah, that's not too bad. I don't want to go too much further. Okay. So now I'm going to use my box scraper. And with a scraper, you always want to come up so that your cutting edge is above center. Oh, I need to get just a little bit. Okay. And now, so that was just cleaning up the lid where it's going to contact the base. And now I want to cut the step for where it's going to fit over the tenon. And for this, I'm going to look at this edge and line it up with the ways. Because the one thing I don't want to do is to have it go in at an angle. If I have it go in an angle like this, it's going to be loose to start and tight to finish. If I do it this way, it's going to, by the time I get it in there, we're going to have looseness. So that's not quite deep enough. That's only about 1/8 of an inch. I want to go more than that. Sorry for the canaries. Okay. Can you see any of that with this? Okay, so, yeah, I mean, so you can see that this is pretty smooth. And there you can see the step I made, all right? And I'm just going to go in there quick. Now, if you go in here with sandpaper, do not touch this, all right? Don't touch this step. And part of the reason for that is that the wood is not the same hardness around the whole thing, and you want this to remain really true. Okay, so that's my lid. All right. You can finish the inside. You can add a doodah to it if you want. I'll use a point tool. And just add two little score marks. So step one. Oh, I am going to need that back to make the jam chuck, but so there are some tricks as well. I didn't do it on this one. But one of the things that you can do if you're making a regular box, you can cut the tenon first. And when you make the tenon, so on a box like this, I would have gone in and cut that tenon, all right, and then parted this off, all right? But there's a little trick is, if I make this tenon a little longer, and rather than parting it off flush to the bottom of this, I leave a little bit of that tenon on this side of the part, so that when I part it off, I have a little bit of that tenon here. That tells me exactly the diameter of that tenon, all right? So I know that I can't make this cap. I can't cut this relief any bigger than that sucker, because they'll just go and slop around. And so I've set... Is that on your handout? Yep. Oh, I don't know about if that is. So what I've done now is I've taken these dividers and I've just made it bigger than the cap recess, all right? So that'll give me a place. Ooh. That's not running quite as true as I had hoped. Well, that's as true as it's going to be. All right, so you know how to do that. You get this the size of the tenon, the rough tenon to start, make it a little bigger. And when you do that, you only put in the point that's on the left side of the center. Because if you get this side in, it'll come flipping around at you. So what you're doing is now looking in. You know that's now roughly a little bit larger than the lid recess is. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do actually is true this up, because it's rough, it's running a little bit out around. So that tenon recess is about that big. So if I do this first, all right, I may have, if that would have a lot of grain that I really want to match or something, let me play around with the first 1/16 of an inch, because if I go too far, I won't lose that much. Okay, I just cut away the divider marks. And this is where you really, I'm going to take a little bit more. Now, one of the things you can do here, when you start making the jam chuck tenons, taper it, all right? Just slightly tapered. And that way, you can you can start to get the fit. See, that's getting fairly close. So I want to be very careful now. As I used to say to the kids, from an old Marx Brothers movie where they were trimming a mustache, it's just a little snoop too much. And this one, oh, I got to take off more on it. Yeah, well, it's easy to go a snoop too much. Because again, as I say, you're taking the wood off of both sides. See how close that was? I hardly touched it. That's still good. This jam chuck, you want tight, all right? Because you're going to bring up the beginning, to get rid of a lot of this junk. But the end of turning the top of the lid, it's going to have to be just held on by the jam chuck, all right? So you want it tight. So when you're done, you can go back and trim this a little bit more to get the tightness that you want, okay? But for right now, it's going to have to be pretty tight. And if you feel, well, let me just check the fit here. That's as tight as I want. I was going to show you how that's because you cut that off with a parting tool. It's a little bit rough. So I was going to go in and show you how you don't scrape with this where you actually cut that tenon, but there's not enough. Not enough there. Yeah.
You can cut that tenon to full depth yet. You just got a small taper to make a tight fit.
It's pretty close. I mean, I got a little bit more room, so, but.
At some point, you're going to go back and cut a little more.
You can see that's the inside. That's pretty close. You can hear it, that's it spinning. So I should be a little ginger with it. Now, if I want to put a lid on it, this is the time to do it. But a standard ginger jar doesn't have it. One of the things I would have been more careful about if I was making a deeper lid, I would have measured generally with a pencil and then mark on the outside where the top of the inside is. So I know and I don't turn through. I don't turn through the lid. Now I'm only sanding this with 150, so I mean I would be going up through all the grits like you would normally do. Okay. So one of the things is when you do a lid like this, I don't know if I talked about it. When you make a rounded over lid like this, the reason that these have a knob on it, so you can pull the knob. When you go to pull a round top like that, you don't have the grip that you would, all right? So all of these that have a really rounded over top have that on there just because they needed something to pull that out, to pull the lid on. This, oh, good. So this, now I can pass this around. No, I lied. I gotta have it back for a second, just for a second, because I gotta mark. This is going to be a heck of a thin ginger jar. Okay, so what I'm doing is I was just marking on here so that when I put this on, it comes right to the shoulder. There's no flat showing or anything else, okay? And I'll go through that in a second. Now I'm going, yeah. So I'm going to want to make this kind of on a real ginger jar, it's a pretty squat thing. So you've got shoulders that are pretty dang high. So I don't want to taper this into there. I want to come over pretty sharp. Okay. Oh, good. I have 1/8 of an inch yet. So I could have tapered the inside of this so that this lip here is a little bit of an angle and made this round all the way up to the tenon. So then when it sits there, it just sits concave to convex, okay? But what I'm doing here is I'm leaving it flat. So what I've got is a flat bottom here to the flat on there. I've still got just a little bit more. Okay, and when I'm doing that, I'm watching right here because there's enough light that that's where I can see if it's moving. Yep, I just got a little bit more. Okay. So now the question becomes, we got that. The question for you folks, how long do I make this? Because I only have this much diameter to work with. And I want to have at least down here enough room for a jam chuck. How long should I make this, considering you now see what the top is going to look like? Do you want it here? Do you want it here? This way? Right about here? All right. How about right here?
Is that the full length of your base, or that's the bottom of the jam chuck?
Yeah. Well, now, I'm going to make this the bottom of the box. All right? So that means this will be the jam chuck, but I also will have I'll have to part it off, right? So the actual jam chuck is going to end up being about that long. All right. So what I want to do now is basically define the bottom. How big a diameter do I want for the bottom? Whoa. And as I said, I'm probably going to end up not following one of my rules, and I'm going to, because of this diameter, I'm going to make it a little smaller. Now I can play around with this some, but I'm not going to take it down any more than this because I still have to hollow that puppy out, all right? But I need to get the outside to where I want it. So when I'm hollowing it out, I can get to the right wall thickness. This is my regular spindle gouge. The detail gouge, you can see it's got a lot more angle, a lot pointier. The difference between the two is on a detail gouge, your flute is very shallow compared to a traditional gouge. So that's good enough for right now. Now, if I would have brought a Jacob's chuck and everything, I would be drilling this thing. Whoa. Now that's really a pain. Tighten that again. And of course, on something like this, you're going to have to leave the bottom thick enough that you have enough weight in it. Let's just see what that old box scraper is going to do. Whoa. I'm going down there pretty deep without, one, in a hurry, and two, without drilling any of it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it would. Well, oh, that was one other thing I wanted to say to you. That if you're going to play with design, you don't have to make a hollowed out box. You can just turn the shapes until you get a shape that you really like. You can use scrap wood and just turn it to a shape. Just don't hollow it anywhere and say, oh, I like this. And then you can do it into a full-fledged box. Let me just try a little bit more. So what I'm doing now is I'm feeling against this wall, all right? So I got a ton to go, all right? That's that deep right now. All right, so I can leave it at that. So let me just go ahead and try and work on the wall a little bit. Take me another 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. Okay, let me just do a little more up the wall, and then we'll call that good enough. Okay. I'm going to sand that a little bit. Okay. Now let me part that off and then we'll flip it around and do the bottom. And then we can call it a night. I'll talk about it when I get this parted off. Can you still hear me all right? Good. So, walls are really thick, but it would have just been more of the same. Now comes the question of how you want to jam chuck this. Because there are two ways. I could turn a tenon that fits the inside of this, or I can do a recess that fits the outside of this. Doesn't matter, I've done them both ways. You get let's just say on the bottom, you don't care so much about the fit has to be on the outside and on the inside of the cap, right? You don't care so much when you did it, was this perfectly parallel to the ways? So if it was a little bit like this or this, putting a tenon inside is going to be a looser fit, all right? You know that this outside is clean and parallel. There is one trick, too, I didn't show you. Because I was there pretty quickly on this. When this is still on here, and you want to check, is this recess I cut parallel to the ways? One of the things you can do is take, this is a little tiny piece, so not so much with this, but if I had a smaller piece of wood, sometimes I do use a pencil, and I hold it right against the inside of this lid. If it's out this, I've got it this way. If it's like this, I got it that way, okay? Now, there is another way you do it. If you've ever bought a set of calipers, you have a set of calipers that go out, and you figure, what the hell do I ever use that for? It's this, all right? You put it down at the bottom. You work them out so they're a tight fit. If you can just pull them right out, it's looser at the top than it is at the bottom, okay? If you can't pull them out, it's tighter at the top than it is at the bottom. So the calipers that have the legs that go like that, that's what they can be used to measure. All right, I'm going to See if I can do this. I got enough here that if I got a problem with it, I can try her again. So the one thing you want to not do here is make the hole bigger than the tenon is, all right? So the idea is you get this to the right measurement and then tighten it up a little bit just to make sure I'm not going to cut exactly where this is. I'm going to cut to the inside and work my way out to it. And I can use this box scraper to do that. And again, I want to get it so this edge is parallel to the ways. Okay, let's see how it's doing. It's in the neighborhood. Oh boy, that's close.
In this case, you want it tight, pretty tight.
Absolutely. Because it is so easy to go past that. Okay? So if you go past it, start with a tissue. If it's really close, if it needs a little more beef, go ahead and use a towel and just put it around there and jam it in. No. I just haven't. So I could bring up this, all right, but because this one has the point still in it, and this is so little real estate, I then have to turn out the point, you know. So you could take out the point and just use the ring to hold it and do the outside edge. But the thing is, when you're in here, you just have to be really gentle. So let's see if it works. That was pretty tight, but
The other thing that I saw in a video was make sure that you're going in
yeah,
towards the headstock. You're not, because it's too easy.
you are correct. You are correct, and I was trying to go this way. One of the things about using, we were talking about this before the meeting with finials, that, Charlie and I were talking, I guess, is that when you're doing end grain like this with, because finial's end grain too, right? So when you're doing a finial, and it'll tend to want to run that wood up the lower flute, part of the flute. And so that's why you'll see me when I do finials, I do most of them with the skew. because the skew is definitely either in towards the headstock or towards a tailstock. It doesn't go at it across. So what I'm doing is I'm undercutting it so that it's going to sit on the outer rim. I'm going to want to clean this up because that came from a parting tool cut. All right. Now, we'll do, so let me make sure that that's, yeah, that's relieved. I'm gonna just sand it just a little bit. Yeah. Jeez, you can't see a darn thing. Okay. So I would have liked to have had this same size lid and probably had another 1/2 inch on each side to give that nice ginger jar shape. But with what I have, I think that was about as much of the shape as we could do without getting the foot too small. You know, spiral just kind of kicked out. So anyway, that's it. Anybody have any questions? All righty.
Thank you.